I turned 50 years old on a Saturday in October, and not one of my 4 children showed up to celebrate with me. Not one. I'd spent 3 weeks planning the dinner, made reservations at Lucia's, the Italian restaurant in downtown Seattle where I'd taken them since they were kids. I'd called each of them personally to confirm. I'd even offered to pay for their flights if distance was an issue. And on the night of my birthday, I sat alone at a table set for 5 dar, watching the candle burn down on a tiramisu I couldn't bring myself to eat, while the waiter kept asking if my guests were running late. They weren't running late, they simply weren't coming, and they hadn't even bothered to call. That night, sitting in my study at 11:47 p.m., I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my attorney, Gerald Morrison, and told him I wanted to completely rewrite my will. "Robert, it's almost midnight," Gerald said, his voice thick with sleep. "Can this wait until Monday?" I looked at the framed photos on my desk, my 4 children at various ages, smiling, happy, the way they used to be before money and entitlement turned them into strangers. "No," I said, "it can't wait. I want them out, all of them. Every single one." There was a long pause. "Are you sure about this? This is a significant decision. Maybe you should sleep on it." I thought about the empty chair across from me at dinner, about the text messages I'd sent that had been read but never answered, about the years of being taken for granted, of being nothing more than a checkbook to my own children. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "Draft the documents. I'll sign them first thing Monday morning." 24 hours later, my 4 children were standing on my doorstep, faces pale with shock and what looked like genuine regret, after Gerald had called each of them personally to inform them of my decision. But what I told them next, what I revealed about why I'd really called that lawyer, changed everything. Not just for them, but for me too. Because sometimes, the cruelest lessons teach us the most important truths about love, family, and what really matters when time runs out. Let me tell you how we got here, because this story isn't just about one missed birthday. It's about 30 years of slowly losing my children to the very things I thought I was building for them. Success, security, and the kind of comfortable life I never had growing up. My name is Robert Anderson. I'm 50 years old, and I built Anderson & Associates, a commercial insurance brokerage firm in Seattle, from absolutely nothing. I started the company when I was 25, working out of a shared office space in Pioneer Square, cold calling businesses 12 hours a day. By the time I was 35, we had 20 employees and contracts with some of the biggest companies in the Pacific Northwest. By 40, we'd expanded to Portland and Spokane. Today, the company is worth approximately $8.5 million, and I still go to the office every morning at 7 a.m. My wife Claire died 6 years ago, ovarian cancer, diagnosed too late, gone within 8 months. We'd been married for 26 years. She was the center of our family, the one who kept everyone connected, who organized the holidays and birthday dinners and made sure the kids called their father once in a while. After she died, things started falling apart slowly, like a building settling on a weak foundation. The kids came to the funeral, of course. They cried. They hugged me. They promised they'd visit more often, call more frequently, stay close. But grief has a way of revealing what's real and what's just comfortable habit. And what I learned in the 6 years since Claire died is that my children loved their mother, but they'd been tolerating me. I have 4 children. Jennifer is 30 years old, my oldest, a corporate attorney in San Francisco, married to a venture capitalist named Todd. They live in Pacific Heights in a house that costs $3.2 million. Michael is 28, works in pharmaceutical sales in Los Angeles, drives a Tesla, and dates women who look like Instagram models. Sarah is 25, got her MBA from Northwestern last year, and now works for a consulting firm in Chicago, travels constantly, stays in 5-star hotels. And then there's my youngest, Daniel, 23 years old, who's been finding himself for the past 3 years, which apparently requires living in a beach house in San Diego that I pay for while he pursues a career as a surf photographer. I put all 4 of them through college. No loans, no debt. I paid for Jennifer's law school, 3 years at Georgetown, $250,000. I gave Michael the down payment for his condo in Santa Monica. I bought Sarah a car when she got her consulting job. I've been covering Daniel's rent and living expenses for 3 years while he builds his portfolio. And I never asked for anything in return except maybe a phone call once in a while, maybe a visit on holidays, maybe for them to remember that I exist when it's not about money. The warning signs had been there for years, but I'd been too busy or too proud or too hopeful to see them clearly. Jennifer called every 3 months, always when she needed something, advice on a case, a connection to one of my clients, or most recently, a $50,000 loan for Todd's startup that couldn't miss. Michael texted on my birthday and Father's Day, usually just "Happy birthday, Dad," with a thumbs up emoji, no phone call, no video chat. Sarah sent long emails about her travels and her accomplishments, but never asked how I was doing, what I was working on, whether I was lonely in that big house by myself. And Daniel called when his rent was due, or when his car needed repairs, or when he'd maxed out the credit card I'd given him for emergencies. Claire had seen it happening. In those last few months, when she was still lucid enough to have real conversations, she'd tried to warn me. "Robert, you're making it too easy for them," she'd said one afternoon, lying in our bed at home because she'd refused to die in a hospital. "They don't appreciate what they have because they've never had to work for it. You need to let them struggle a little. Let them figure out who they are without your money fixing everything." I'd argued with her, told her she was being too hard on them, that they were good kids who'd grown into successful adults, that we'd done our job as parents, given them opportunities, education, security. Opportunities, yes, Claire had said, her voice weak but firm, but you also gave them entitlement. And there's a difference, Robert. There's a big difference. I'd dismissed it at the time as the bitterness of someone dying too young, angry at a world that was taking her away from her family. But Claire had been right. She'd been right about everything. And I'd spent 6 years proving it to myself through 1,000 small disappointments, birthday cards that arrived a week late, Christmas visits that lasted 2 days before someone had to get back for work obligations, phone calls that were always rushed, conversations that felt transactional rather than genuine. I'd become a resource to my children, a problem solver, a bank, but not a father. Not really. My 50th birthday was supposed to be different. I'd decided months in advance that I wanted to do something meaningful, bring everyone together the way Claire used to. I'd called Jennifer in August, 2 months early, and told her I wanted to plan a family dinner for my birthday. "Oh, Dad, that sounds wonderful," she'd said. "Let me check our schedule. Todd's been so busy with the new venture round, but I'm sure we can make it work." I'd called Michael next. "Yeah, absolutely, Dad. Wouldn't miss it. Just send me the details." Sarah had been enthusiastic too. "That's perfect timing, actually. I should be back from my Singapore trip by then. Count me in." Even Daniel had promised to come up from San Diego. "For sure, Pops. I'll catch a flight. It'll be good to see you." I'd made the reservation at Lucia's for 7 p.m. on Saturday, October 14th, table for 5. I'd sent reminder texts a week before, then 3 days before, then the day before. All of them confirmed. All of them said they'd be there. On Friday night, Jennifer texted, "So sorry, Dad. Todd's deal is closing Monday and we have to be in New York this weekend. Rain check." An hour later, Michael called. "Hey, Dad. I totally forgot I have this huge sales conference in Vegas this weekend. My boss would kill me if I missed it. We'll celebrate when I'm back in town, okay?" Sarah's text came Saturday morning. "Dad, I'm so sorry, but they just moved up the client presentation to Monday, and I need the weekend to prep. I feel terrible. Can we do dinner next month when things calm down?" Daniel didn't text, didn't call. At 6:30 p.m., as I was getting dressed for dinner, I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I called again at 6:45. Voicemail. I drove to Lucia's and sat at that table alone, telling myself maybe one of them would surprise me, show up late, have a good excuse for the confusion. By 8 p.m., I accepted the truth. Not one of my 4 children had cared enough about me to spend 2 hours at a birthday dinner. Not one had cared enough to be honest about not coming. They'd all lied, confirmed their attendance, and then bailed at the last minute because something, anything, was more important than their father turning 50. I drove home in silence, parked in my driveway, and sat in my car for 20 minutes just staring at the house Claire and I had bought 30 years ago. The house where we'd raised those 4 children, where we'd celebrated their birthdays, their graduations, their achievements, where Claire had died in our bedroom while I held her hand, and I felt something break inside me, not dramatically, not with anger or tears, just a quiet, cold realization that I'd been fooling myself for 6 years. My children didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. And the moment I stopped being useful, the moment I asked them for something as simple as their presence at dinner, I was disposable. I went into my study, poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey, and looked at my will. I'd updated it 2 years ago with Gerald's help. It was straightforward. Everything split equally 4 ways among my children. The company, the house, my investment accounts, life insurance, roughly $2.1 million per child after taxes. I'd felt good about it at the time. Felt like I was setting them up for security, giving them a foundation. But sitting there in my study at almost midnight, all I could think about was Claire's voice in those final months. You're making it too easy for them. They don't appreciate what they have because they've never had to work for it. That's when I called Gerald. That's when I told him I wanted them out. All of them. Every single one. What do you want to do with the estate instead? Gerald had asked, after I'd convinced him I was serious. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I just knew I couldn't leave everything to 4 people who couldn't even show up for a birthday dinner. Put it in a charitable trust, I said finally. Split it between the Seattle Children's Hospital, the Cancer Research Foundation at UW Medical Center where Claire was treated, and a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. Nothing to my children. Nothing. Gerald was quiet for a long moment. Robert, I have to advise you to wait. Sleep on this. Talk to your kids first. Disinheriting your children is a significant step, and they made their choice tonight, I interrupted. I'm making mine now. Draft the documents. I'll come in Monday morning to sign them. I hung up before he could argue further. I finished my whiskey, and then I did something I hadn't done since Claire's funeral. I cried. Not out of self-pity, but out of grief for the family I thought I had, and the painful realization that it had been an illusion for years. Sunday morning, I woke up with a headache and a clear mind. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolved. I spent the day cleaning out my desk, organizing files, updating my passwords and account information. I wrote letters to each of my children. Not angry letters, just honest ones, explaining why I'd made this decision, what they'd lost in the process of chasing success and money, and what I hoped they'd learn from this, even though it was probably too late. I sealed those letters and put them in a safe deposit box with instructions for Gerald to deliver them after my death. Then I went to bed early, ready to sign the new will first thing Monday morning. But Monday morning at 8:15 a.m., before I could even leave for Gerald's office, something happened that I didn't expect. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about my children and about myself. My doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen making coffee, and I almost didn't answer because I wasn't expecting anyone. But it rang again, persistent, urgent. I opened the door to find all 4 of my children standing on my doorstep. Jennifer was crying. Michael looked like he hadn't slept. Sarah's eyes were red and swollen. Even Daniel, who usually maintained that laid-back surfer demeanor, looked shaken to his core. Dad, Jennifer said, her voice breaking. Please, we need to talk to you. Gerald called us all yesterday. He told us what you're planning to do, and we deserve it. We know we deserve it. But please, give us 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain, to apologize, to... She couldn't finish. She just started crying harder. I stood there in my doorway, looking at my 4 children, feeling nothing. No anger, no sympathy. Just a kind of distant curiosity about what they could possibly say that would make any difference. Come in, I said finally, stepping aside. They filed into the living room like condemned prisoners, sitting on the edges of chairs and couches, looking at me with a mixture of fear and shame that I'd never seen on their faces before. "And I want you to understand something before any of you speak," I said, standing rather than sitting because I didn't want to be on the same level as them. "I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing this because I finally understand something your mother tried to tell me before she died. I've made you all weak. I've made you entitled. I've taught you that love is measured in money and that your father exists to solve your problems and finance your lives. And the result is that I raised 4 successful, educated, financially comfortable strangers who couldn't be bothered to spend 2 hours with me on my birthday." Jennifer spoke first. "Dad, you're right. About all of it. We've been terrible, selfish, ungrateful. And I don't have an excuse. I don't have a reason good enough to explain why I chose Todd's business deal over your birthday, why I've treated you like an ATM instead of a father, why I haven't called you just to talk, really talk, in years." She wiped her eyes. "But I need you to know something. After Gerald called me yesterday, I spent the entire night going through old photos, pictures of you teaching me to ride a bike, pictures of you at my law school graduation, pictures of you and Mom at my wedding. And I realized I've been taking you for granted so long that I forgot what I was taking for granted. I forgot that you're the reason I had any of those opportunities. That you worked 70-hour weeks so I could go to Georgetown. That you've never once asked me for anything except to be your daughter. Michael was next. I don't even know what to say, Dad. I've been a shit son. There's no other word for it. I've treated you like you're just this resource I can tap whenever I need something, and I've never stopped to think about what you might need from me. After Gerald called, I called Aunt Linda, asked her about you, about how you're doing, and she told me you've been alone in that house for 6 years, that you eat dinner by yourself every night, that you work all day and come home to nothing. And I've been 2 hours away in LA, living my life, posting on Instagram about how great everything is, and I couldn't even drive up to see you on your birthday." Sarah was crying so hard she could barely speak. "I'm the worst of all of them," she managed finally. "Because Mom told me, before she died. She called me into her room one day when you weren't there, and she said, 'Sarah, your father is going to need you when I'm gone. He's going to be lonely. He's not going to know how to ask for help. Promise me you'll check on him. Promise me you'll call him.' And I promised. I looked her in the eyes and promised. And then I spent 6 years breaking that promise over and over because work was more important, because my career was more important, because I was more important." Daniel spoke last, his voice quiet. "I've been the most selfish of anyone. You've been paying my rent for 3 years. Paying for my life while I figure things out. And I haven't even had the decency to visit you. To thank you. To acknowledge that I'm a 23-year-old man living off his father's money like some kind of trust fund kid. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. And if you never want to see me again, I understand. But I need you to know that Gerald's call woke me up. It made me realize I've been treating the best man I know like he doesn't matter. And that's not the person I want to be." The room fell silent. I looked at each of them, at their tears, their shame, their apparent remorse, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. The faint hope that this wasn't too late, that the lesson had been learned, that my children might actually understand what they'd lost. "Gerald called you yesterday," I said slowly. "He told you I was rewriting my will, that I was removing all of you from my estate. And within 24 hours, you're all here, apologizing, telling me how much you've realized, how wrong you've been." I paused. "How do I know this isn't just about the money? How do I know you're not here because you're afraid of losing your inheritance?" Jennifer stood up. "You don't know, Dad. You can't know. We can sit here and swear it's not about the money, but we've given you no reason to believe us. We've spent years proving that we only care when it benefits us. So all I can tell you is this: keep the new will, sign it, give everything to charity. We don't deserve your money. We don't deserve anything from you. But please, please don't give up on us as your children. Give us a chance to prove we can be better. Give us time to show you that we're capable of being the family Mom wanted us to be." I sat down then, suddenly exhausted. I'd spent 2 days preparing myself to cut my children out of my life completely, to be done with the disappointment and the loneliness and the feeling of being used. And now they were here, saying the things I'd needed to hear for years, and I didn't know if I had the strength to trust them again. "I need to tell you something," I said quietly. "Something I haven't told anyone yet except Gerald." They all looked at me with sudden fear, and I realized what they were thinking. "I'm not dying," I said quickly. "At least, not imminently, but I am sick." The fear on their faces shifted to confusion. "What do you mean?" Michael asked. I took a breath. "I was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease 4 months ago. The tremors are still minor. You probably haven't noticed them because we barely see each other, but it's progressive. In 5 years, maybe 10, I'm going to need help. Real help. I'm going to need family." I looked at each of them. "And when Gerald called you yesterday, when he told you I was rewriting my will, he also told you about the diagnosis. He told you because I'd instructed him to include it in the conversation. I wanted to see what you'd do with that information. I wanted to know if you'd come because you were worried about your inheritance or because you were worried about your father." The silence that followed was absolute. Jennifer's face had gone white. Michael had his head in his hands. Sarah was staring at me with an expression of horror and understanding. Daniel was crying openly now. "You were testing us," Jennifer whispered. "You were testing us to see if we'd come for you or for the money." I nodded. "And here you are, all 4 of you, within 24 hours of finding out I'm sick and that I might be cutting you out of my will. So now I have to decide, did you come because you love me, or because you're afraid of losing something?" "Both," Michael said suddenly, looking up. "It's both, Dad. And I hate that I have to admit that. Yes, the idea of losing the inheritance scared me. Not because I need the money, but because it made me realize how completely I've failed you as a son. That you'd rather give millions to charity than to your own children. That says everything about how we've treated you. But the Parkinson's, Dad, that's what got me on a plane this morning. That's what made me realize I've been living 2 hours away from you while you've been dealing with this diagnosis alone. That's what made me understand that I'm about to lose the chance to be your son while you're still healthy enough to give me that chance." Sarah stood up and came to kneel in front of my chair. "Daddy," she said, using the name she hadn't called me since she was 10 years old. "I came because I'm terrified of losing you. Not your money. You. I came because Mom was right. I promised her I'd take care of you, and I've broken that promise every day for 6 years. And if you have Parkinson's, if you're sick, if you need help, then I want to be here. I want to be the daughter you deserve, even if you never leave me a single dollar." Jennifer was crying again. "When Gerald told me you were sick, my first thought wasn't about the will. It was about Mom's funeral, about how you stood at her grave and held my hand and told me everything would be okay, even though your whole world had just collapsed. You were strong for all of us when we needed you. And the idea that you're facing this diagnosis alone, that you've been alone for 4 months dealing with this, and not one of us noticed or cared enough to check on you. Dad, that's what brought me here. That's what made me realize I've lost sight of what actually matters." Daniel hadn't moved from his spot on the couch, but his voice was steady now. "I'm 23 years old and I've never had a real job, or paid my own rent, or taken responsibility for anything. And you enabled that. You made it too easy for me. But that's on me, not you. You were being a good father. I was being a bad son. And if you have Parkinson's, if you need help in the future, I want to be the person who steps up. Not because you're paying my rent, but because you're my dad. Because I love you. Because I've been taking you for granted while I had time, And I don't want to look back in 10 years and realize I wasted whatever time we have left. I sat there listening to my children, really listening, for the first time in years. And I realized something Claire had known all along. They weren't bad people. They were lost people. They'd gotten lost in the comfort I'd provided, in the success they'd achieved, in the busy lives they'd built. They'd forgotten what held them together because I'd made it too easy to drift apart. But they were still my children. And maybe, just maybe, this crisis, this moment of almost losing everything, was what they needed to find their way back. I'm going to tell you what I've decided, I said finally. And I want you to listen carefully because I'm only going to say this once. They all leaned forward, anxious, hopeful, terrified. I'm not signing the new will. I'm keeping the original one, the one that splits everything 4 ways. Relief flooded their faces, but I held up my hand. But there are conditions, non-negotiable conditions, and if any of you break them, I'll revisit this decision immediately. First condition, family dinner, once a month, minimum, here at this house. Everyone attends unless there's a genuine emergency, and by emergency, I mean someone's in the hospital, not a work meeting or a client call. We sit down together, we eat, we talk, we act like a family. Second condition, phone calls. Each of you calls me once a week, not texts. Actual calls where we have real conversations. I want to hear about your lives, and I want you to ask about mine. Third condition, honesty. If you need money, ask. If you can't make it to something, tell me in advance. If you're struggling or scared or need help, reach out. No more lies, no more last-minute cancellations, no more treating me like an inconvenience. I paused, making sure I had their full attention. Fourth condition, the Parkinson's. As this disease progresses, I'm going to need help. Doctor's appointments, eventually help around the house, maybe even care. I'm not asking you to put your lives on hold. I'm not asking you to move home, but I am asking you to be present, to be involved, to be the children your mother raised you to be. If you can't do that, if you're only here because you're afraid of losing an inheritance, then walk away now. I'd rather face this alone than face it with people who are only present out of obligation or guilt. Jennifer spoke first. I can do that, Dad. All of it. Starting today, I'm going to call Todd after this and tell him we're coming up to Seattle once a month for family dinner. Period. Non-negotiable. And I'm going to start calling you every Sunday morning. That's going to be our time. Michael nodded. I'm in Thursday nights. That's when I'll call. And I'm going to start coming up more often. Maybe once every other month, just to visit. Not for birthdays or holidays. Just to see you. Sarah stood up. I'm going to do better, Daddy. I promise. I'm going to keep the promise I made to Mom. Weekly calls, monthly dinners. And when you need me, for appointments, for help, for anything, I'll be on the next flight. I swear. Daniel finally stood up too. I'm going to get my act together, Dad. I'm going to find a real job. I'm going to start paying my own rent. And I'm going to prove to you that I can be responsible, that I can be someone you're proud of. And when you need me, I'm there. Always. I looked at each of them, at their faces full of determination and remorse and hope. And I made a decision that I prayed I wouldn't regret. Okay, I said simply. Okay. Let's try this. Let's see if we can be a family again. Let's see if we can honor your mother by becoming the people she believed we could be. Jennifer rushed forward and hugged me. And then they all did. The 4 of them surrounding me in a way they hadn't since they were children. And I felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years. Hope. Hope that maybe this wasn't the end of our family. Hope that maybe the crisis had given us a chance to rebuild something better, something real. Hope that Claire was somewhere watching this and smiling, knowing her last lesson to me had finally taken root. That was 8 months ago. And I'm sitting here now, writing this story, because I want people to understand something important about family and inheritance and love. My children have kept every single one of those conditions. We have dinner together once a month without fail. They call me every week. Jennifer on Sundays, Michael on Thursdays, Sarah on Tuesdays, Daniel on Saturdays. They ask about my symptoms, come with me to doctor appointments, help me research treatments. They're present in a way they haven't been in a decade. Are they perfect? No. Do they still sometimes get busy and distracted? Yes, but they're trying. They're showing up. They're being the family Claire wanted us to be. And I've learned something too. I've learned to let them struggle sometimes, to not always fix everything with money, to let them figure things out on their own. I've learned that the best gift I can give my children isn't financial security. It's the chance to prove they're strong enough to stand on their own. I'm still sick. The Parkinson's is progressing exactly as the doctors predicted. My hands shake more now. I've had to cut back my hours at work. But I'm not alone. I have my children. And more importantly, they have each other. They've started getting together without me. Siblings dinner once a month where they meet up and talk and rebuild the relationships they'd let atrophy. Jennifer and Sarah went to visit Daniel in San Diego last month. Michael and Jennifer had lunch in LA when she was there for work. The truth is, I don't know if they came to my door that morning 8 months ago because they loved me or because they were afraid of losing their inheritance. Maybe it was both. Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that they came. What matters is that they're still here. What matters is that we're building something real from the ruins of what we'd let fall apart. And when I'm gone, whether that's 5 years from now or 20, I hope they'll remember this. I hope they'll remember that it's never too late to show up. Never too late to say you're sorry. Never too late to become the person someone else needed you to be all along. That's the story of how I almost disinherited my children and what they did when they found out. That's the story of a missed birthday that became a second chance. That's the story of a family that was broken and found a way to be whole again, even if only for a little while. Because in the end, that's all any of us really have, a little while. And what we do with that time, how we choose to show up for the people we love, that's what defines us. That's what we leave behind when the money and the houses and the success all fade away. We leave love, or we leave regret, and my children chose love. Finally, desperately, imperfectly, but they chose love. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.